Good evening and welcome to students, faculty, staff, alumni, and friends joining us for tonight's event at Tufts University. And a warm welcome to all the viewers joining us at watch parties across the country. Tufts is thrilled to host the New York Times for tonight's edition of Get with the Times. We at Tufts University are committed to student mental health and well-being, fostering resilience, and creating a healthy and supportive community. Openly discussing mental health challenges is a critical step towards reducing stigma, building understanding of the challenges so many of our members in our community face, and advancing society's attitudes surrounding mental health. We are looking forward to hearing Kevin Love share his experience and perspective, and I hope you will all enjoy this evening's program. Now, please join me in welcoming Diane Bainbridge of the Hudson's Bay Company.
Thank you, President Monaco. And thank you to all of you, the New York Times, Kevin Love, Tufts University for hosting this event in your beautiful campus, and most importantly, you, the students, for being here today to discuss the critical issue of mental health. Hudson's Bay Company is one of the fastest growing retailers in the world and is the parent company of Saks Fifth Avenue, Saks Off Fifth, Lord & Taylor, and Hudson's Bay in Canada. In 2017, HBC launched the HBC Foundation in the US, uniting all of our charitable efforts with a new philanthropic focus on mental health. Together with our Canadian HBC Foundation, we pledged to distribute $6 million Canadian by 2020 to support mental health programs that provide increased awareness and access to health. We chose to take on the challenge of mental health because it's vital to the communities that we serve. Today, we're excited to announce that we're awarding $300,000 to the JED Foundation to establish the HBC Foundation Campus Program. The JED Foundation provides critical mental health and suicide prevention programming to colleges nationwide through their JED Campus program. The HBC Foundation Fund will help JED reach its goal of 4 million students in 2019. To kick off the fund, we're pleased to invite Tufts University into the JED Campus program as the first recipient of the HBC Foundation Campus Scholarship Fund. Thank you, Tufts, for your dedication to improving student mental health. Today is just the beginning of our partnership that will impact the mental health landscape for young adults nationwide. We're confident that with the right support, everyone will have an equal chance to grow into healthy, productive adults. I would now like to introduce Megan K. Safer from the New York Times. Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Megan K. Safer with the New York Times, and I'm so pleased to welcome you to Get with the Times, our live conversation series for college students. Hosted by top journalists paired with famous figures in entertainment, politics, sports, business, and more, the series is all about inspiring young people to get involved in the issues that matter to them the most. Tonight, we are thrilled to welcome Kevin Love, who has become a leading voice in the national conversation around mental health awareness. He will be interviewed by the New York Times Sports of the Times columnist Juliet Macur. Let's meet our guests. Kevin Love is a leader on the Cleveland Cavaliers and an undeniable force across the entire league. In 11 seasons, Love has laid claim to 5 All-Star selections, an NBA championship, and won a gold medal from both the Olympics and the FIBA World Championships. Off the court, Love has established himself as a philanthropist. He recently launched the Kevin Love Fund, an organization dedicated to inspiring people to live their healthiest lives. Juliet Macur is an award-winning columnist at the New York Times and a best-selling author. Her recent work includes coverage of the Olympics, she has covered 10 of them in her career, the USA gymnastics team's sexual abuse scandal, and investigations into doping in the sports world. In 2016, the Associated Press sports editors named her one of the top 10 sports columnists in the United States. We look forward to what is sure to be a compelling conversation. In the meantime, the New York Times would like to thank our hosts, Tufts University, and our collegiate partner, Her Campus. Tonight's event is supported by the U.S. HBC Foundation, the charitable arm of Hudson's Bay Company that is dedicated to making mental health a priority in every community. I'm so delighted to share that the New York Times is streaming tonight's event to students who are hosting watch parties on college campuses across the country. You'll hear from some of them later this evening. Please join me in welcoming Juliet Macur and Kevin Love.
I'm going to pretend those cheers were for me. Thank you, Kevin. Just wanted to initially first of all, thank you all for being here. Thank everybody for tuning in on the web and for everybody hosting watch parties all over the country. It's pretty cool that so many people are interested in this very important topic. Thanks to Tufts University, and of course, thanks to Kevin for taking time out of his basketball schedule to be with us.
No, I'm not doing that much. So.
Yeah. But you're not wearing the boot, so that's a start.
I'm finally out of the boot.
So you look healthy. But first of all, I wanted to talk about just the format here. We'll talk for about 30 minutes, about half the time, and then we'll open it up to questions both from the audience here and at the watch parties all over the country. So you have 30 minutes to survive a grilling from me.
Okay.
See if you could do it.
Wish me luck.
Sure. When I was initially approached to talk to Kevin and do this interview, I was very honored and excited about it because I feel like as a culture we don't talk about this issue enough, and when we do talk about it, it's always reactive, whether it's a tragedy with a celebrity like Kate Spade or Anthony Bourdain. Suddenly pages of the New York Times too are filled with stories about mental health awareness and how to prevent suicide and how to deal with depression and those type of things. So what really made this a special moment for me, Kevin, was that you're doing this proactively. You're going out to talk about this issue when you don't have to, where you could have had that panic attack last year and nobody would have ever found out about it, and life would have gone on for everybody, and you wouldn't really make the impact that you're making. So I wanted to thank you in advance for the work that you're doing. So it's been almost a year since a day that changed your life. It was November 5th. It was a home game against the Atlanta Hawks.
Right after halftime. Yes.
Right after halftime, and I think that you said that you just didn't feel right all day.
No, I didn't feel right all day, and it was a really odd feeling because there was things outside of basketball that I was dealing with, and as far as depression and anxiety, it's something that I dealt with my entire life, and when I was younger, I didn't quite understand it. I didn't realize why I felt this way, and it manifested in rage fits and in anger, and I always was able to separate myself and had somewhere to go when I was younger. But when I had my first real life-changing experience with a panic attack, it was November 5th. It was after halftime. I hadn't quite felt right the entire day. I've been having problems with my family. I've been having other problems away from the court as well that were adding to the stress of expectation. We were a team that I was 6 years in Minneapolis where we didn't make the playoffs, playing for the Minnesota Timberwolves, and I got traded. And it was a 2014-2015 season to a team, the Cleveland Cavaliers, where we were expected to win a championship every year. So expectations went absolutely through the roof, and this was my fourth year. We had played till June every year. We played in the NBA Finals, and this was another year we got off to a really, really slow start. We made some changes. Kyrie Irving, who now plays in Boston, had been traded, who's an unbelievable talent and a generational point guard, but we had got off to a really slow start. So basketball had always been my escape. It had been a way to alleviate stress and get away from the dark thoughts of when I'm alone and my mind would go to a very, very deep and dark place. But basketball was at such a low point that everything just manifested into having this panic attack. And I remember it was after halftime, and we had called the first time out because, let's face it, we had played like shit the first 2 or 3 minutes. And I remember coming to the bench, and I couldn't catch my breath. And I heard what the coach was saying, what my teammates were saying, the adjustments we had to make, how we were playing, what we had to do. And I couldn't catch my breath. I could not concentrate on what was going on. So I left the huddle. Ty Lue had come to me and said something, and I just told him, listen, I'll be right back. So in my younger years, I had a place I had an outlet to have these rage fits and cry and go into my room and never, not leave for a while. But I had to escape to the locker room, and I was essentially looking for something that I couldn't find. I couldn't catch my breath, and I wasn't getting oxygen, and I just went to my trainer's room and fell on the floor and was gasping for air. And I was sticking my hand down my throat, trying to feel like I was getting something out of my throat that wasn't there. And I panicked fully, lost my breath, all sweats, and I come to a point where I thought that I was fully having a heart attack and that I was going to die. And I had never experienced something quite like that before. And I followed up, they got oxygen for me. People had met me on the ground just trying to get me air, get me to calm down. We went to the Cleveland Clinic, one of the best hospitals in the world, and I completely checked out. They said nothing was wrong with me. So that's, when I came to the point, looked myself in the mirror and said, okay, it might be time to start addressing, what's been going on as early as I can remember, probably my younger teenage years.
How did you know it was a panic attack? Did the doctor tell you, or did you have a feeling that it might just be psychological?
Yes, but I didn't quite understand it until I had really met with the doctors and first started seeing my therapist. And I didn't realize or even conceptualize what that was. And I didn't know that it was even a real thing. And just going through it, and I mean, listen, the stats say that some of you have gone through it as well. And the first one is frightening. I was very, very scared and put in a very vulnerable position.
Why didn't you want to tell anybody?
I think because, like I said in my Players Tribune article, it was so much of growing up and having this playbook. Like, I had a dad who was born in '49, and his father was very strong and tough, and they had gone through a few wars, and my dad was 20 years old in 1969. Like, think of everything that happened in the 60s. Up until I was born in '88, so my playbook was to just put all that stuff over here and suppress it, not talk about it, keep your chin up, don't show any emotion, don't cry. And I think as young men, that's what we're taught to do. And I was afraid that my teammates would think I was weak, people would think less of me, and that I would be unreliable on the court. And basketball was always my way out. It was a form of escapism for me. So I always, basketball was my first love and something that brought so much joy in my life from all those dark moments and from all that depression. And I was afraid people in my inner circle away from basketball were going to find out, and I didn't know what they were going to think. I think a lot of the time in our lives, whether it be when we're young or college students or up into adulthood, we are scared of the unknown.
I wonder, was it magnified because you're a star athlete that you sort of felt? I'm putting words in your mouth.
Yes.
But you felt perfect. That I know from covering sports for a long time that these that athletes are, or at least they feel invincible, or we make them invincible. Yeah. Fans think that you do everything. You're superheroes. Right. So did that make you even more afraid? And you might maybe have had a contract coming up, contract negotiations that maybe you didn't want to look vulnerable in any way? It
definitely did. And actually, leading up to telling my story, we had mentioned Jackie McMullen's name, a senior writer at ESPN, who's one of my favorite people. She had talked to me at the All-Star break about. Do I need one too? Okay. We had talked about kind of that theory and being vulnerable and contracts. And she said, because she was writing her story and then ended up doing a 5-part series in August centered around mental health. And she had mentioned there's guys that don't want to come out in the NBA and talk about it because they are worried about their contract. They are worried about what the front office or what ownership would think of them, or would they be unreliable, or what their teammates would think, or I have to be able to provide for my family, and I don't know how long my career is going to last. So being vulnerable and taking that step and making that sacrifice to allow themselves to do that was too much for them. And my story is a little different. Like, I had my panic attack. I had a very dark period for a couple months leading into the new year, and we weren't playing well after the new year. My team I had actually left another game for similar reasons, and my team had turned on me, and they didn't know really what was going on at the time. So I had to tell the guys. I said, "Hey, listen. I'm dealing with something away from basketball that I'm going to be better for you guys, but on the court, I'm all in. Like, you guys are family. I believe in us. I've sacrificed so much for this team, and I'm going to do everything I can to get right." And as the conversation continued, Tyronn Lue, our head coach, had said in response to somebody, airing a grievance that, "Oh, you mean Kevin's panic attack?" And I didn't know that anybody knew. And no, I don't believe a lot of people did know, from whether it be front office all the way down to our training staff. So there was that. There was, the rumblings of what had happened after that, leading into All-Star break, where people were talking about it in Los Angeles last year. That's where our All-Star break was, into Jackie speaking to me. And actually, when I got to All-Star break, that's when Parkland, Florida happened. And I was sitting there thinking, man, how many people this affects, as well as, the kid, what was he, 18 or 19 years old, as well as the kids whose lives were taken, and, the parents that had to deal with that, and the kids having to go back to school, so on and so forth. So I think there was a number of things pushing me to tell my story, as well as me wanting to tell my own story in my own words, because that was something I was worried about, that somebody would get hold of it and it would take on a life of its own rather than it being in my own words. So I wasn't so much worried about the repercussions of it. I was just, I was a little unsure, uneasy of what people would think or how they would view me.
Is it working now?
There you go.
There we go. I'm interested in what your dad thought. I mean, your dad, like you said, your dad was a player himself. He's a pretty tough guy. Most families don't have playbooks, but I'm sure that you did, about the rules of the house and just how things went. And I'm wondering what he said and sort of how we change that sort of micro way of we look at like what it means to be a man.
Well, yeah, I think I really believe that whole conversation has to change as well. Like, men have to allow themselves to be vulnerable and to express themselves, because there's been so many movements, whether it be LGBT, civil rights, Me Too. I mean, there's so many movements, but and that's always moving in the right direction, and it's not divisive. Like, men, I think, are so far behind, that we need to allow ourselves to even just it's not changing the culture is the wrong term. It's even speaking a different language in a way, and that's being better men, holding ourselves accountable, but also allowing ourselves to be vulnerable and speak our truths, because nothing haunts us like the things we don't say. For so long, I mean, it haunted me for 29 years of my life, or since I could understand it. So you
didn't have a conversation with your dad about it?
I didn't. I did have a conversation with my brother, though. And, when you're in it, especially when you're in like a really deep depression, and I know some of you can attest to this as well, you don't realize the effect that you're having on people around you. You have blinders on, and nobody can really tell you anything. So I remember speaking to my brother. It was maybe less than a week after I had written the article, and the article had come out. And, we went to get a coffee. My brother's 2 years my senior. I asked him, I said, what did you think? And he said, you know what, Kevin, I remember when you were young, and there'd be times where he said we would lose you. And I go, well, what do you mean? He just said, you would go away for a while, and then eventually Kevin would come back. And I, was taken really aback by that, and just, I knew that I was going through certain things in that time that I didn't understand, but seeing it from somebody who shared the same home as me growing up, I mean, that's the closest that you can be to somebody is your own blood. And I didn't really have I couldn't really conceptualize or see that when I was going through it.
I'm not sure if you can explain this now, but if you have somebody in your family or a friend who might be going through these kind of things, like you losing a friend for a couple weeks, from your perspective, what could other people do?
Well, it's amazing. The most amazing thing to come of all of this, and it's been therapeutic for me, is the community. The community aspect of all of this. And either somebody I really truly believe that everybody is going through something, whether it be on a daily basis or whether it be at a point in your life, because we all suffer, at the very least, loss at some point in our life. Like everybody is going to expire at some point. But I really truly believe that, whether it's you or somebody at arm's length to you is going through something. But it wasn't until I allowed myself to do this that I realized that there was such a big community. Like, we had a great intro here about all my accolades, but the biggest thing in my 11-year career so far that I've done has been this because of the community. More people in my entire career have come up to me about sharing my story and what I've been dealing with than any other point in my career. So I found that to be super therapeutic, but also, very cool, and a big reason of why we're sitting here today, because I believe, universally we need it, but, here in America more than any time, I think that we've needed it as well.
So it's amazing that even though you're around tens of thousands of people, when you play basketball and you've been around the world internationally and all these fans and people watching you and wanting your autograph, and that you felt alone.
I did, and you mentioned Kate Spade and one of my heroes, Anthony Bourdain. I mean, Parts Unknown I was just watching it today. He was, a wild story is, I've been working actually with the Players Tribune. I'm working on, potentially doing a show that's in somewhat a tribute to him. But in that week, Kate Spade had taken her life, and Anthony Bourdain. I woke up and checked my phone, and it was Game 4 of the NBA Finals. And that just completely shut me off for not only that day, but a little while. But I remember I was cleaning up my home and ready to, we had our exit meetings ready to leave for the off season. I had all this legal pad paper of, pages of notes just going over, I think it was like 5 or 6 seasons of Parts Unknown. I just sitting there like, wow, this is really wild. And Bryan Cranston, who I'm a big Breaking Bad fan and a huge fan of his as well, he came out after that and said, success is not immune to depression. So it doesn't discriminate. I mean, this is a universal thing. It's not about race, gender, sexual preference, socioeconomic status, demographic, what age you are. I mean, this relates, and this, I think, hits home for everybody.
What bothered you the most about Anthony Bourdain's suicide?
That he was so universally loved and well-liked, and it felt like, he had money, he had traveled the world, you felt like you traveled the world with him. Beautiful child, girlfriend, had a TV show that everybody loved, had been through it. He was so relatable in so many ways, and that's why I couldn't get enough of him or his show, because he was just real. He was an authentic person that seemed to essentially have everything, and it just felt like we had lost a great Samaritan, a great person, a person who stood for all the right things. And he had the best job in the world. He got to go all over the world and ask questions like, what makes you happy? What's it like here? What kind of food do you eat? And like he said, you'd be amazed at the answers you'd get. So that was that was somebody that I'll always remember as a bright spot, and in a lot of ways try to live my life like.
Could you empathize with him? I mean,
Totally.
obviously you're very likable. People, are your fans, and you seem to have everything in the
Right.
world. You have a $120 million contract.
Right.
Not too shabby. I had to throw that in, I'm sorry. It seems like that you had some things in common with him. I wonder if that's what really hurt you the most.
Yeah, it
about
did, and it's tough to find, that was something I was really worried about, because we have these annual meetings with the Players Tribune or, with my agency, and we always talk about, especially now, how are we going to find ways to how are people going to express empathy or commiserate's a funny thing to say, but, find empathy when you seemingly do have everything. But it manifests and people suffer in different ways. And I think that you mentioned money, money doesn't make you unhappy, but it's just not the only currency that truly matters. I think that we have this thing on the Players Tribune where we actually write a letter to our younger self. And for me, my emphasis was always it's going to be a business and you're going to have to make money, but that doesn't solve everything. Yeah, it's good to have, but if I could look back and tell myself I would generate more of my energy and have more of an emphasis on creating more time, because you can always make more money. It's going to fluctuate throughout your life how much you're going to make, and with time, you're never going to have any less of it than you have right now. It's fast, fleeting, and you can't buy any more of it. So I always feel like that's something that I would tell my younger self, because I look back in the rear view and everything seems to be clearer, but I'm one of those guys that said, man, I would have changed. Had I had the presence of mind, I would have changed how I thought about certain things, but also I would have just enjoyed the moment more.
You spent all these years feeling alone, and it manifests itself in different ways. So you write this Players Tribune article, which was obviously very powerful. You press send, and then I think, did you say 6,000 emails within 72 hours? So that's suddenly you go from feeling really alone to 6,000 people surrounding you with, I'm assuming most of it was positive. I don't know if you remember one particular email that really stood out to you. Can you describe?
So many, even to today, on all my social media platforms. But yeah, I pressed send. I remember talking to my agent literally the night before I did press send, and he said, "Are you sure you want to do this? Because it's going to be big." And I thought, maybe, but if I'm able to just affect that one kid or that one person who's suffering, like I was, that's going to make all the difference. But I didn't realize how vast the community was. It was like I just did 23andMe, signed up for 23andMe, and saw where I came from and all that. So I pressed send, and then I had this global family all of a sudden of people that had either had a kid that had gone through something or they had gone through something themselves, and that was super impactful. Like you said, we had close to 6,000 emails, I believe, within the first 72 hours, and we tried to we had put it out there that we tried to respond to every single one, but it kept coming in and kept coming in and kept coming in. So I think just being where we are today and setting up the fun and working with people like Bring Change to Mind and Just Keep Living, and having a strategic partner with Headspace for meditation and finding different ways to impact the masses and the people in a big way has been very therapeutic. The community has been large and vast, and I think affecting the younger demographic and continue to implement new ways to just beat down the stigma, but also learn what you're going through in many different ways is going to be key. So I'll just end with this answer, is that in the last year, I've just started doing the work, so I know that I don't know as I'm not going to say as much as I should, but I'm really trying to soak up and be a sponge, learn as much as I can, because I've just started to do the work now. So there's going to be a lot to learn, but I enjoy being a leader in this space because I think not only is it much needed, but we're going to be able to impact a lot of people.
So can you just talk about the emotions of maybe your agent telling you that 6,000 emails came in, or what did you learn about yourself and you writing the article when you realized that 6,000 people had responded in such a quick time?
I think just that it didn't matter. I think the craziest thing that happened to me was a super close friend had, it's not funny, but the article had impacted him in such a heavy way that, and I'm not saying it should, this is how it should happen, but it was impacted, it hit him so close to home and so close, like to the heart and to the head, that he didn't go to work for 3 days, which is, I don't know, that's kind of a funny way to...
Does he play in the NBA?
No, he doesn't. This is one of my good friends from back home, but he was just so moved and impacted by it that he just needed a moment, but it was, I guess he needed more than just a moment. He needed a few days, but no, it was just really eye-opening to me. Just somebody that I had never known was really going through something like that. From my agent saying this is going to be big, and more people are going to pick this up than you think. To then so many emails, and even to today, it's just been a wild 6 or 7 months. So I'm still figuring out all the ways that we can impact people in a really positive way.
Like you said, you've done a lot. It's been a year since the panic attack. I feel like you've really been doing a lot of things, a lot of different outreach. And one of them were a web series where you shaved your facial hair for it because it was sponsored by Schick,
Locker
right?
room talk, yeah.
Locker
That's
room
not my
talk.
look. I don't like myself with a shaved face. But.
Yeah, I didn't recognize you. It was pretty surprising. But I watched the episodes, and there's various other famous athletes.
Michael Phelps.
Thank you, Michael Phelps.
Yep, Channing Frye, Paul Pierce, who played in Boston. So.
And it's shout out to Paul Pierce. But what was really powerful for me when I was watching it was just never seen anything like it. I've covered sports for, I think it's been 20 years, and I would never dream that two professional athletes would be talking about the things that you were talking about in this web series. And I suggest everybody look it up. I mean, they're really short. They're about 5 minutes each. But in one, I think you and Channing Frye were talking about, it was a lot in 5 minutes. You were talking about grief. He had lost both of his parents.
Both of his parents within
a month. And you, I know that you had lost your grandma Carol.
Yes.
And she was, maybe you could tell us a little bit about what Grandma Carol meant to you, and just the fact that you hadn't worked through that grief,
sure.
Up to the point of the panic attack.
Well, that was one of the first things I realized that I was holding on to for so long, because I mentioned time earlier and not being able to get that time back. And I was so singularly focused when I was young, and I think in a lot of ways I had blinders on with that. I think what makes us happy is doing things for others and spending time with close ones, whether it be friends or family, among other things. But my grandmother stood for all the right things. She had great morals, great character. She had lived her life vicariously through her family, and that was number one. That's all that mattered. And I had been a little bit jaded getting into the NBA, and I was 19, put into a situation where I was making millions of dollars, and I just had one thing in mind, and my goal was to get every ounce that I could out of this basketball thing, where I forgot to then make a life. And my grandma, I had seen her in the summer, but I would spend a couple minutes at my house, go and see her, and not really put in that quality time with her, to where she had never been out to Minnesota, and this is 2013, so this is my 6th year in Minnesota, and she was supposed to come out for Thanksgiving, and we hadn't been to a Thanksgiving together since I was in high school. So 2007 was my senior year of high school. And, some plaque had gone up to her brain. She had, a lot of medical problems that had led to a stroke. She never got better, and she had died soon thereafter. So a lot of that time that I wish I had spent and wish I could have back was gone. And I never had grieved after that because I had, just gone right back into the season. And, it always manifested itself in different ways, but that stuff was tucked away, deep-seated. I wasn't able to grieve really until last year. So having gone through that as well, that's why I was able to empathize and be there with Channing when he had, because we had lockers right next to each other in our locker room, and we always put next to each other on the road as well. So when he had lost both parents, that was a tough thing to see such a close friend go through. But I think those shared experiences and just being either an ear or a shoulder for him or a drinking buddy was something where I could really help him, and just everybody has their way to doesn't have to be a professional. Everybody has their way to air things out and air grievances or something that they're going through. And with Channing, it was through his teammates, because that was his way of getting away from it all.
Now, you mentioned in July on Instagram, you posted a picture of Grandma Carol and said something like, I wish you were here right now, which made me just realize that, or maybe you can explain how it, these things, just because you had a panic attack, went to a therapist,
Right.
and have been in therapy, doesn't mean, suddenly Kevin Love is 100%. Sometimes you're not okay.
It actually got
right?
worse before it got better.
And so how do you explain that to people, or what kind of advice can you give people who are struggling through something and, haven't been to a therapist, or maybe want to go to a therapist for the first time? I know you and Channing talked a lot about that too in this web series, where they started talking about what it's like to see a therapist for the first time. And it was, let me tell you, it was pretty awesome to see two men talk about just like how cool it is to tell your problems to somebody else, and how natural it is, and how it was just like a wonderful moment. So I'm wondering, how do you cope these days?
There's a lot of ways that I relieve, certain things in my life. Like with stress, I've learned to do. It's always been, basketball, whether it be working out. I love to work out, so that in itself will.
Wait, hold on. Before you talk about how you deal with your stress, I think a student has a question about that.
Okay, sorry. I will.
So, but let me just ask you for the last. My question is, are you happy now, or are you happier because you finally, let this burden go, or let somebody else carry the weight for you a little bit?
I think like perfection, it's like happiness is like a moving target. I think there's times in your life where you're obviously, happier than, certain situations or certain things that happen throughout, because each day is going to bring a different challenge. Each day is going to, pose, something that you may not be ready for, or you're not going to meet expectations. But I think it's almost like I was talking about today, like a quiet joy. Like people expect it to be so great all the time, and it has to be this like elation and euphoric experience the entire time. But I think in some ways, in a lot of ways, that's unrealistic. But just taking your time to have gratitude and look around you and think, okay, this is a great life. I've met, I have everything that I would need. I have all my basic needs met. What do I really need after that? It's that quality time with family. It's friends. It's doing things for others. It's making a gratitude journal and making sure that you're just giving thanks and trying to better your life. I think more than any time in my life, I've been more comfortable in my own skin, and I live by the saying that only by admitting who we are do we get what we want. So I had to pass the mirror test and look at myself in the mirror and say, okay, how can I be a better version of me? Because I think, like I said, that that perfection is always a moving target, and we're all a work in progress. Like it's never going to be perfect, and you have to once you realize that and realize that everybody's going through something, and we have this vast community that's universal, that you're gonna be a lot happier.
Thanks. Now we have some questions from students. I think we're going to start out with a video question from a watch party at Baylor University.
Hi, my name is Bryan Laughlin. I go to Baylor University. My question is, if you had advice for a college student, either athlete or not, what would it be?
It's a real specific answer.
Advice, yeah, for a college student or athlete. I think in a lot of ways I had just said it, like, with success or with perfection, I think that we're all a work in progress. Like I said, it's something that we're all working towards. But I would say, take a minute to breathe. Know that things have a way. The universe has a way of unfolding things and working themselves out. And if I feel like if you are going through something, or you see somebody that is going through something, just pay it forward. Find a way to impact somebody's life in a very positive way, because you never know really how far that could go for someone. I know that if I would have just known that one of my friends when I was young was struggling, or they had been able to express that to me, that wouldn't have been able to help me more. But that whole language and that thought process when you're young is not there. So I think that is something, one of the reasons we're here, and we're going to find a way to elicit that change.
Thanks. Thank you, Brennan, for that question. Next question is from right here.
Hello.
Yeah, there you are. It's pretty awesome.
Hi, my name is Joshua Clarkson, and I'm a sophomore student here at Tufts. And my question is, how did your expectations of how people would react to the telling of your mental health story compare with how they reacted in reality?
I was very, shaken up is the wrong term, but I was very uneasy about how it would be received. But I think, like anything in life, you make up or you manufacture these things in your brain that he just went dark. I don't know what happened.
He is not there anymore.
He's not there.
Next question.
No, so I think you manufacture these moments or thoughts in your brain where you think things are going to be so much worse than they are. And I mentioned that rear view mirror earlier. You look back, you thought, man, that wasn't so bad. So that's exactly what happened. I know it was universally pretty much well received in as far as the Players Tribune article went. But yeah, leading up to it, I was very uneasy, because this wasn't a bridge I had crossed ever before. This wasn't something that I was comfortable sharing to the masses at this point, to where I clicked one button and then a lot of people knew. So it wasn't like a lot of things in life. You look back and it wasn't as bad as you made it up to be in your brain. I know a lot of you in this room, or each and every one of you in this room, have it in you to have courage and to have the next person, and allow yourselves to be a certain way and be positive and make that change. So I think that can only be a good thing.
Okay, next question comes video from the University of Illinois.
Hi, Kevin. It's Maggie. I'm a student from the University of Illinois at Chicago, and I was wondering, how did the team respond to your article in the Players Tribune?
How did the team respond?
How did the team respond? That was awesome.
You guys know each other?
Yeah, it was.
They go way back.
Yeah, it's Maggie again. Oh, Mags. How did the team respond? It was I remember we had traveled to, we had met at the plane and headed to Denver that afternoon. And I remember we were, on the bus, and when our bus had stopped at the hotel, we had sat in this group of veterans in the back, and the two guys that were back there with me were Kyle Korver, who, RIP, just got traded to Utah, which is my guy. I poured a little out for him last night, so we're good. So Kyle was back there, and just he had just mentioned that he wanted to help. He wanted to find a way to jump on board, and I said, Kyle, this is the first 6 hours. Like I'm not sure where this is going to go. And he said, well, when you do cross that bridge, I want to be a part of it. So that was comforting and relieved a lot of the anxiety around how it was going to be perceived by my teammates. And then LeBron had pulled me aside when we were walking off the bus and had shook my hand and basically he had told me that, he said, today you helped a lot of people. And that's coming from a guy who just has poured so much money into helping kids internationally, globally, but also has this I Promise school in Akron as well, who has done so much to further conversations and be such a pillar in so many movements. So that was a special moment as well, just knowing that I had the team support, had his support, and nobody was quiet about it either. It was out there that they supported me, and I was very thankful for that.
I wonder if that helps you get through your own struggles, that you're helping other people at the same time.
For sure, and it also helped me I'll get to that in a second, but also it helped me in going to work as well, knowing that I could be comfortable, knowing that I am flawed, that I am a work in progress, and that I have a number of things to work on, like anybody. But I think being able to help people has been, probably that's definitely the best part about all of this. And I feel like, I was always so caught up or anxious in what am I going to do after basketball? And I turned 30 in September, and I was heading into my and now in my 11th year in the league, and you cross that path of thinking like, okay, I'm even if I were to play 20 years, I'm still over the hill. I'm in year 11, so that creeps into your mind, like, okay, what am I going to do after basketball? Because you're burning the candle at both ends, and unless you're LeBron James, you're just not going to last forever. So that was something that crept into my mind, and now I feel like I found something that's very meaningful, and that I'll be able to work on for hopefully the rest of my life.
Yeah, a bigger purpose.
Bigger purpose,
right.
Exactly.
Now back to the darkness in the back of the room there. We have an in-person question from Pamela.
Hi, my name is Pamela Toscano. I'm a senior at Tufts. My question is, how have you seen mental health in sports, specifically basketball, change and evolve throughout your career?
That's a good question. You'd mentioned I just have a feeling that fucking light's gonna go off in a second. No. Like, such a little kid.
I'll hold your hand.
I'm waiting
if it goes
for
dark.
it. Yeah, thanks. No, it's definitely changed to a point where people are very forward and forthcoming in talking about it. I've, at least in my personal experience, I've become a person that, especially in this past year, that's just been like, really laid it all out on the line and just said, hey, listen, this is what you get. It's part of being comfortable in my own skin. It's also part of being 30, because I was told after 30 you kind of stop giving a shit about the little things. But, am I cursing too much? Am I good?
My mom's watching, so...
Okay, sorry.
Sorry, Mom.
No, so I've been a person that's just kind of laid all my cards out there and said, this is what you get. And I think that has been something that has taken a whole lot of time. I mean, going back to LeBron for a second, I can remember even just this past week or two, and when he had decided to, he had the decision, he decided to go to Miami, like he had talked about, and this is the best athlete, best player in the world here we're talking about, and he talked about, I want to be liked by everyone, and finally he had let that go, and that gave him, a real sense of freedom in his brain, and I felt that to be, extremely powerful because, there's such a, I mentioned Anthony Bourdain, the common thread of authenticity is so huge. You shouldn't be anybody but yourself. And I think I fought that for a long time. I saw this box or this image of somebody that I had to be, but I think the rawness and the being vulnerable and allowing myself to just walk the walk of being myself and being comfortable in my own skin took a lot of practice and a lot of time. But I feel like I'm still getting there, but I've taken a huge step. But as far as mental health, and you mentioned Chick Hydro, with Channing, everybody has their own story to tell. Like Paul Pierce, I was saying 9 times a week ago, he'd been stabbed 9 times. It was 11 times. He was stabbed 11 times and had a really weird. Well, it's not weird, but he had a thing about being in crowds that gave him a huge social anxiety. So that was his story and his thing that he had to really overcome from an anxiety aspect. And Channing Frye, he had lost both of his parents in 1 month, but also he had a year of his career where he had a heart condition and was taken away. The game was taken away from him. He had people from the organization or his organization he was playing with at the time tell him that he'd never play again. And he had, I think, just had his second child and was, talking to his wife Lauren and saying, how am I going to be able to provide for my family, and how am I going to be able to, put food on the table when, this game that I love and this escape and this out has been taken away from me. And then Michael Phelps, he's been very vocal and very upfront about, what he has dealt with, really on a daily basis, to a point where. He had talked about taking his own life. So I think it's, I know those are only men that I talked about, but there's a lot of men and women from every sport that are dealing with something. So I think that change and I mentioned the language and that stigma just needs to continue to be beaten down. And I think as athletes, because we have such a wide or a long reach in who we can really speak to and how many followers we have or social media, that we can impact a lot of people for the better.
Yeah, I neglected to mention this earlier, but DeMarcus DeRozan, I guess.
DeMar, yes.
I'm sorry, DeMar. Sorry about that.
DeMarcus Cousins, that's a different story.
Was it in February? Mid-February,
Yes.
he just he tweeted something like, this depression
gets the best
of me, and from that, this outpouring of support came forward, and then he wrote a story with the Toronto Sun newspaper, and then a couple weeks later, you came out in the Players Tribune. So just one top athlete writes one thing on Twitter, and it helps him feel not alone, and other people think they're not alone either, and it's just the power that you guys have that's way beyond the basketball court.
He can't go unnoticed. I mean, he was a person that, and we still keep in contact. Like I've been, since he had been traded from Toronto to San Antonio, he was been someone I've been in contact with, because he really opened the door for me. And when he had talked about that, it made me feel normal in a way. Like, okay, I'm not the only one in the league that's really going through this and has been dealing with this for so long. And he's such a high impact, high all NBA type player, and he's admitting that that he's going through this, and he's from the inner city in Los Angeles, and that's not easy to admit, or I can't imagine it could be easy to admit when you're from such a rough neighborhood, and thinking about how people are going to see that.
Now, we're going back to a video question. You could continue answering the question that I cut you off with
That's
earlier.
okay. It's okay.
It's a video question from a student at the University of Massachusetts.
Hi, my name's Jenna, and I'm a student athlete at UMass Lowell, and I'm curious, what are the 3 ways you help manage your stress?
Okay, so that was the
There we
question.
go. How do you manage your stress? You can
Okay.
continue, pick up where you left off.
I would say exercise. I mean, that, like I say, it goes without saying, but even outside of basketball, I've always been somebody that's really loved to exercise. I'd say I grew up in Portland, Oregon. I was born in Los Angeles, but I grew up in Portland, Oregon. So, I like to be in nature. I like to put my feet in the grass or just even go outside and get fresh air. I think that can be, just being around the elements can be very relieving or very just make you feel a sense of being grounded. It's like I said, that kind of quiet joy where you look around and think, wow, this is great, this is beautiful. What else? I would say dogs. I mean, who doesn't love dogs, right?
Do you have a dog?
No,
Probably not.
I'm thinking about it though. Because they I guess from what science says, like you live 3 to 5 more years, and your anxiety goes down around dogs, and I have I'm not going to tell the joke on here, but it's the one about you put the people in the trunk, and you open up the trunk, who's happy to see you? The dog. So, anybody know that one?
All right. You want to tell the whole joke?
And then I have to say this too.
Now I'm afraid of your answer.
No. No, I'd say I've learned to my uncle, who's been a performer for 50 plus years now. You
can say who your uncle is, maybe?
He's actually here. I'm actually going to his concert after this. Yeah, he's actually performing in Boston tonight. He's the lead singer for the Beach Boys. I don't know if that means anything to you guys, but.
He says it with such, my uncle's.
I never know.
The Beach Boys are a band for all of you college students. You might want to explain that. Okay. Slightly popular way back in the day.
Yeah, right. So he's done TM, Transcendental Meditation, for even longer than that. So he's adopted that form of meditation, and it's really, really helped him. And I've used Headspace, which is out of Santa Monica, where I was born, so that also makes it fun. I've used Headspace as a way to even just take like a minute a day, whether it be to relieve anxiety, whether it be try to help you sleep. And there's anywhere from literally taking 1 minute a day to, they have 30, 40, 50, 60 minute steps, and they have levels to all of it. Where I'm a big list or check maker, I like to check things off, to-do list, I should say. So that they have those type of things where you can accumulate, just checking things off the box and working on different forms of meditation. So I think that is another way.
All right, we'll try to hurry up and get through the next couple of questions. I know our time is running short. We have another in-person question.
Hi, I'm Ayub. I'm a junior here at Tufts University, and my question is, if you could have dinner with someone who inspires you, either dead or alive, and just kind of pick their brain, who would you pick and why?
Well, I think I alluded to it earlier. That's a fun question too, by the way. Everybody always talks about who are the 3 people, but Anthony Bourdain. Because first of all, he knows food. He's been in the kitchen. That's obvious, but he's another guy. Like, he's been everywhere. It feels like he's essentially done everything, and he had this saying the first season of his show. He was talking about a friend of his and how he envied him, but he said he was relentlessly curious without fear or prejudice. And I thought to myself, that is an amazing way not only to travel but to live your life. So just being able to pick his brain, from primitive questions like where's your favorite place you've been, all the way to I'd like to ask him mental health questions, or how long he's been dealing with that. What would have helped him? And then, depending on how long I had, that'd be an interesting conversation, and somebody that I'd really enjoy spending time with, because I have a list. I make a ton of notes on my phone as well, and it's almost like a checklist, as I said in the last answer. But he was somebody that really inspired me, and I wanted to pick his brain. And he was one of those people I had made on my list this past summer that I wanted to meet and potentially shadow on a job. And he's not here anymore, so he would be very likely the number one.
That's a great answer, and you're guaranteed to have a good dinner.
Guaranteed.
Right? He's probably going to pick a good place. Next question is a video question from University of Louisville.
Hi, my name is Joseph Thompson, and I'm a senior at the University of Louisville. How has sharing your personal story shaped your career overall?
I kick out of that one too. How has it shaped my career overall?
These are tough questions, but they're good questions.
I think that it's a good question. I think that it's, as you mentioned, it's given me a higher purpose. If, like I said earlier, if you would have told me I would have been sitting here at 30 years old discussing mental health, I wouldn't have believed you. I never thought I just thought that this was something I'd just be dealing with, or that it was normal, that in the pit of my stomach or in my brain, that this is just something that I was just going to have to deal with. Don't talk about it, suppress it. It's going to manifest itself in different ways throughout my life. But this is basically what life is. And now that I'm sitting here today in my 11th year, it's giving me just a higher purpose, and I think that is I'm very, very thankful for that. I know with that comes responsibility, but like I said backstage, it's something that I'm comfortable talking about, and something that I've lived. Like this is not something that I really prepare for. I just try to speak my truth and speak from the heart, because I've lived it for as long as I can remember, or even longer than I could understand it. And I still think that understanding is, like that perfection I talked about earlier, is a moving target.
In-person question from Melissa.
Hi, my name is Melissa Manzo. I'm a sophomore here at Tufts. I was just wondering, has it gotten easier to share your story over time, or do you still find it difficult sometimes?
I mentioned that responsibility aspect of it all, to be completely honest with you. It's like, you had worked with Allie Raceman before, and I have a really good friend of mine, and that's very close with her, and she mentions, sometimes the responsibility is a lot, because she's so powerful and such a force in nature that she just like has this aura about her that everybody wants to talk to her, and she's so well spoken and so articulate and such a beautiful woman that everybody wants to share their stories and tell how proud of her they are, and so on and so forth. So it's I think in some ways it's that time. You try to reach the masses, you try to talk to everybody, but just being able to find the time for everyone is sometimes hard to do. But that's part of it's a small price to pay, but that responsibility is something that I've accepted and taken into account. But it's moments like last night, we're in Oklahoma City, and there's a guy that brings us food after the game. He mentioned, hey, can I just pull you aside and talk to you about my son who has constant panic attacks? He goes, I just want to tell you, I showed him your story and how much that impacted him, because he's a fan of basketball. I said, well, he's not a fan of me. No, he shared that story with me, and that's what makes me feel good, and what allows me to see the bigger picture overall.
Okay, final video question from Siena College.
Hi, my name is Sammy and I go to Siena College. My question is, what steps can we take to ensure that conversations like this continue to happen in the sports world?
I really feel like there's strength in numbers. I think everybody has their own time of when they feel like they can share what they're going through or their truths or somebody in their life who's been dealing with something. But no, I think it's things like these. It's like a Michael Phelps or a Channing Frye or Allie, like we mentioned earlier, like discussing these topics that aren't easy. And I think that's how you further. I think it's you guys, sitting here today. It's word of mouth. I pray that you guys got something from this. I know I can go all different sort of ways and be long-winded, but I think that there are those strength in numbers. I think that we can work as a community and as a group to help solve this and help figure these tough topics out. And I think that's something as humans that we can help better each other in such a tough social climate.
Okay, final question from a student right there.
Hi, my name is Allison Cohen. I'm a freshman here at Tufts. I'm also from Cleveland, huge fan, so thank you for being here. Thanks. My question is, what is the biggest life lesson you've learned while being a professional athlete?
Well, I really don't want to say a cliche here. The biggest life lesson I've learned, I think it's really changed. It's that whole idea of sticking to sports or sticking to basketball when we do have such a voice and we do have that reach to, the NBA has become such a global sport. And, you have hundreds of billions of people. I mean, if you've ever been to China, that culture is so ingrained in basketball. I've been to the Philippines, Japan. I've traveled to all around the world, and you see how much people love the sport of basketball, and that's just basketball. I mean, we have so many athletes, men and women, who have such a reach to so many people that can help elicit change and start movements and generate money towards great causes and pay it forward to help that next person out. So I think the biggest thing that I've learned is that is to not stick to just stick to basketball. To, if you can help or have a voice, do it. Be bold, be heard, and never be afraid to speak your truth, because there's always that next person going through something. You might know them, you might not. It might be you. It might be a person, like I said, at arm's length. But you can be that voice, and you can be heard.
Thank you. Great questions from everybody. I have a couple more for you, just a couple. So what's next on this journey that started a year and a couple weeks ago?
Yeah, well, we covered a lot of stuff in like the 3 minutes we spoke backstage, didn't we? The question was asked, like, where does this fit in as far as the last 6 months and what you've done? Like, what have I done leading up to this point? And I think that this is a major step, and I think as part of it is not only, it's like walking the walk, right? I want to make sure that I am making positive steps in the right direction. And the biggest thing for me, or why I see it going, at least where my fund is, and I've worked with a lot of great funds and great people already, which I'm very thankful for, but it's the younger demographic, I think, because I didn't understand it when I was young, and I put myself in such a hole early on that I learned about physical education, sexual education. I learned about that sort of stuff, but I was never keen to, or I was never taught that there's genetically you might be going through something in your brain, and I think circumstance plays such a small part so long as your basic needs are met. But then it's also, as the question was asked, like there's steps you can take and ways that you can, help yourself be happier on a daily basis. So I didn't have any of the tools when I was young. I wasn't taught it, and there wasn't any course or you have your health classes, you have you have the sex ed that's put in there, and you have your PEs, you have your extracurricular activities that you can exert your body and athletic performance, like certain things like that, but you never really tackled or faced the mental side early on. And I think that you have to find a way to impact the younger generation, and I think it's all the way up through college students as well, because you guys are the people who are going to shift and change the paradigm and change the world.
I just have a couple takeaways. One, I think everybody who likes dogs, who are either in the audience or who are watching online, should send Kevin a tweet telling him he should get a dog. What kind? Okay. I have a dog. It's great for your mental health. Tonight when I get home, I'm going to break out my little gratitude journal and write, "Dear Gratitude Journal, I'm very thankful that I had a chance to interview Kevin Love today, and you're just making such a positive impact on, like you said, young people or older people, everybody who feels alone in something. And I know that I've personally felt it myself, and my friends and family have felt it, and I know that there's more than a handful of you who are in the audience who have felt it at some point in your life, and what you're doing is so helpful, and it has nothing to do with your prowess in basketball, and I think that's wonderful. So thank you very much, and thanks to Tufts University for hosting us. It's been great, and all of you out there for coming and making this a wonderful evening. All the great questions from you guys in the audience and from all the watch parties around the country. This has been a really special evening. Thank you, Kevin Love.
Thank you, guys. Cool. Thanks a lot. Let me give you a big hug. Thank you.